Hello, I'm Emmanuel Garcia, and I'll be your MC for the program this evening. Welcome. On behalf of the board and staff at Crossroads Fund, I'm delighted to welcome you to Seeds of Change, Funding Bold Movements for Justice, a virtual fundraising event and celebration of activism and organizing in the best city in the world, Chicago. Thank you for joining us. I want to pause to give you a moment to help us grow our tent tonight. I want you to share this link from wherever you're watching on your preferred social media channel to invite your community of friends, colleagues, failed Tinder dates to join us. Let's expand the tent for social justice warriors. Invite them to join. In our previous program, my colleague Lizette and I presented the Ron Sable Award for Activism to Lucy Parsons Labs, a collaborative that sheds light on the intersection of digital rights and on-the-street issues. The Donald F. Erickson Synapsis Award to Truthout, a nonprofit news organization dedicated to providing independent reporting and commentary on a diverse range of social justice issues, and the Linda J. Tipton Memorial Award for Social Justice to A Long Walk Home, a Black-led art organization that advocates for racial and gender justice. Congratulations to this year's awardees. The world is a better place because of the work that you do. You can find that program on demand on the Crossroads Fund YouTube channel, as well as the hilarious comedy set by comic Gwen La Roca. Tonight, we have a very special guest, feminist and writer Angela Davis, who will be in conversation with Scheherazade Tillet, co-founder of A Long Walk Home, Tracie Hall, executive director of the American Library Association, and our very own Jane Kimondo, executive director of Crossroads Fund. But first, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Because of them, we can make our program accessible and share our message far and wide. In the leadership circle, we have the Field Foundation, Resource Generation, Woods Fund Chicago, Chicago Foundation for Women. In our change makers, we have Yvette Cardona and Mona Noriega, Sue Eleuterio and Tom Sorlis, the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, Grand Victoria Foundation, Irving Harris Foundation, Nora Kiger and Bill Foster, Jonathan Lehman, and Zach Hilsing. In our catalysts, we have Martha Biondi, John D'Amelio, Janie Hoft, Mainstream Media, Pierce Family Foundation, Polk Brothers Foundation, and Carlene Schroeder. To view a full list of our sponsors, which includes visionary, mover, and shaker, steward, and sponsor levels, visit our website at crossroadsfund.org/seeds of change. Thank you, thank you, thank you. A special shout out to our champions, our 2022 host committee, who are probably making a cocktail mocktail as we speak. Cheers. Thank you for being the best party hosts ever. I also want to give a big shout out to the Crossroads Fund Board of Directors. Board members, raise your virtual glass. This is an amazing and dedicated group of people who work very hard to make Crossroads Fund a solid and stable organization. I also want to thank my colleagues at Crossroads Fund who make this night and everything we do possible. I feel like I'm giving an acceptance speech at the Oscars. I'm not. Christina Roque, Makiko Yamauchi, Katie Madden, Lizette Garza, Michael Agujar, Joanna Preston, Raquel Jackson Stone, John Lehman, Jane Kimondo, and working behind the scenes, making everything look splendid, Alexis Sanchez Boiso. This team is mainly responsible for making this night happen. And special thanks to all the volunteers who build our capacity throughout the year. We know some of you may be new to Crossroads Fund, so we wanted to let you know a little bit more about our work as a movement funder here in the greatest city. I said that, Chicago. Crossroads Fund is a public foundation that provides resources for groups working on racial, social, and economic justice. Boldly, we raise money and then we give it out. We give it to the groups on the front lines of change. Last year, we moved $3.3 million in grants to 201 powerful groups. 201. We also celebrated an important milestone as Crossroads Fund turned 40. 40 years rooted in radical change. In that time, we've given $15.5 million to over 3,400 groups. That's a lot of grassroots power. That's a lot of donor organizing. And we can see the results: an end to the death penalty in Illinois, wheelchair accessible public transportation, historic improvements in labor law, immigration policies, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and more. We couldn't do any of this work without you. You, the activists, you, the donors, you, our philanthropic partners. Our goal this year at Seeds of Change is to raise $200,000. We're 72% of the way there. We've raised $143,000 so far. Seeds of Change is our annual fundraiser. It happens once a year. Once a year. Right now, we're at 72% of our goal of raising $200,000, but we still want to close that gap. For just a second, we can pretend that we're at a theater in person. Someone please close the exit doors. Don't let anyone out, because people, they leave when they hear an ask coming. I want to see if I can get a commitment from someone in our virtual audience. And the Crossroads Fund staff is monitoring to give. Last night, Lizette shared the wins of the past year that continue to give us hope and that renew our spirit and conviction that we're on the right side. And we are. This work on the ground requires resources, and Crossroads Fund is committed to sustaining the work. I'm going to start at $1,000. I want to highlight the campaign, the Stop General Iron campaign, and the hunger strikers who pushed to deny and prevent a polluting company from relocating to Chicago's southeast side. This is the environmental justice that Crossroads Fund supports. Can I get a commitment of $1,000? I want to see. I'm going to wait in the chat. Can we get a commitment of $1,000? I see a commitment. Yes, thank you, Sue Luterio. Thank you so much for that. The virtual collection basket. If someone can join Sue, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. $500. The removal of police officers from schools as part of the Cops Out of CPS campaign. The Cops Out of CPS campaign as a strategy to end the school to prison pipelines. This is the kind of education justice we need more of. $500. If I can get a couple of commitments of $500 tonight. I know you've already given, and we thank you. I see a $500. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. The passage of a progressive community benefits agreement near the Obama Center, to preserve affordable housing justice. Housing justice in Chicago, not only in Chicago, but all major cities that are experiencing these inequities, Chicago in particular. $200. If I can get a commitment of I see $200. Thank you so much. Mutual aid efforts. Our community has come together to provide care when systems failed to do so. These mutual aid efforts. $100. If I can get $100. A commitment of 100. Yes, I see a commitment of $100. Thank you. And I'm going to ask Alexis in a second if he can give us the update on that. $100. Okay, I see 100. Thank you, Alexis. All right, at Crossroads Fund, we have a growing community of sustainers, people who are supporting movement organizing over time. Shout out to our monthly givers. Can I get a couple of people to become sustainers at $5 or $10 or $20? I'm a sustainer. Thank you to all of our sustainers. It all adds up. $5, just $5 a month. That goes a long way. If I can get someone, yep, I see a commitment of a sustainer. Thank you so, so, so much. Thank you to everyone who's already given, who's going to give. Thank you so much for moving the needle on our fundraising tonight. I'll give you an update. I'll come back to an update on our fundraising later on this evening. Another way you can support is to participate in our online auction, Bidding for Change, Not Charity. This year, we are over 170 items to bid on, and it's thanks to the businesses and individuals who donated gift certificates, artwork, services, jewelry, books, their weekend home, and so much more. Be sure to give these progressive businesses your support when you can and let them know that Crossroads Fund sent you. The online auction is open to all and will close tonight in just a couple hours at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. So set your alarm. So bid high and often. It's for a good cause. And now I know why we're all here. The reason why we're here tonight for the main event, the conversation with our special guest for Seeds of Change, Angela Davis. Please give a big welcome to Crossroads Fund Executive Director and our fearless leader, Jane Kimondo. You're on mute, Jane.
Oh my God! After 3 years, you'd have thought
3 years later, and we're on mute.
In stage, I would have it together, but do I? No, but it's all right. 3 years. Hey, Manny, how you doing?
Good. This is our cue that we're live. You know, that's all it is. You know, this is our world. Thank you, Jane.
And thank you so much for everything that you do, Manny, and thank you for holding it down in the last 2 days. Hello, everyone. My name is Jane Kimondo, the one who does not know when they're mute after 3 years. Okay. I have the honor of being the executive director of Crossroads Fund. We, the staff and board, warmly welcome you to today's program with our special guests, Tracie Hall, Scheherazade Tillet, and our teacher, Angela Davis. Before we bring them to this virtual stage, a few grounding thoughts on our current political and social moments. We are still in a global pandemic. Yes, we are. That continues to disproportionately affect people of color in all ways. There are many wars, conflicts, occupations going on around the world in Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Palestine, Somalia, just to name a few. Conflicts, wars, and occupation disproportionately affect people of color in horrendous ways. The 2020 social uprising boldened our resolve, stretched our imagination to all that was possible then, now, and in the future, and it brought millions and millions of us together. However, this has been met with a backlash in the form of anti-protest laws, criminalization of public protest, and restrictions to access to voting, just to name a few things. As we end the 1 month only dedicated to women, that was March, it is not lost to us that Black women were not given a moment to rest and enjoy the attention this month could have brought. In Chicago, the death of trans women continues to haunt us. We take this moment to lift up Elise Mallory and Tatiana LaBelle. Nationally, the public humiliation of Ketanji Brown Jackson during the Supreme Court confirmation process was another level altogether. Altogether, it was serious stuff. To all my fellow Black women, we are enough, and we deserve better. So having said all that, I want to bring it home to all who believe in freedom. We who believe in freedom still find joy in the work, in the world, collectively and individually. We understand the assignment that this work is for the long haul and joy is imperative. And with a joyous feeling, I now introduce our guest for today. So I'll only read the short bio, and the longer ones will be in the chat. Our first guest is Scheherazade Tillet. Scheherazade is my friend and is the executive director of A Long Walk Home, a national organization that she co-founded with her sister Salamisha Tillet. A Long Walk Home is dedicated to Black girls and uses art to explore the themes of Blackness, play, freedom, trauma, and healing. Scheherazade is a photo-based artist. She's a curator and a feminist. She intimately photographs the inner lives and public performances of Black girlhood throughout the United States and the Caribbean. In the last 2 months, Scheherazade has been busy, busy, busy. She has a solo exhibition entitled Scheherazade Tillet Black Girl Play as part of the inaugural Artist in Residence program at Express Newark. She has also curated the largest exhibition of Black girlhood entitled Picturing Black Girlhood. Both of these exhibitions are currently on display in Newark, New Jersey. So for all of you there next to New Jersey, go sit and give Scheherazade some love in the process. In Chicago, Scheherazade curated the Black Girl Altar, which was just on display at the Museum of Contemporary Art. The altar was created to bring attention to the missing and murdered Black girls and young women who are often victims of racially motivated killings, domestic violence, police shooting, sex trafficking, and sexual assault and harassment. Scheherazade's work has been featured in several notable publications and media outlets. In short, she's awesome. Welcome, Cher. Hey, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, I want to introduce our next guest, Tracie D. Hall. Tracie is a friend and a board member at Crossroads Fund. She's also the executive director of American Library Association. This association is 143 years old, making it the oldest and largest public library association with 57,000 members and more than 200 staffers. Wow, Tracie, you have your work cut out for you. But we love public libraries, don't get us wrong. Tracie is the first female African-American executive director in LA's history, American Library Association's history. Yes, yes, and yes. In addition to her passion in libraries and everything that libraries stand for, Tracie is an artist, curator, and the biggest champion for the arts. So you see there's a theme here. We have all the artists in the house. This passion is steeped in a deep knowledge and reverence of ancestral wisdom and tradition. Tracie has advocated and moved resources to the arts in the various roles that she has held within the philanthropic sector and as Deputy Commissioner of Chicago's Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Event. Oh, we had a good time when Tracie was there. We still have a good time, but COVID happened. Tracie's passion for the many possibilities that libraries provide and her love for the arts is only matched by her love of travel and communing with people indigenous to the area her travel takes her. Karibu Tracie, karibu Tracie.
Asante.
Okay. Go on mute. Not a good look, but we'll take care of it. So our guest, Angela Davis, Angela. Oh, we're all looking forward to having this conversation with Angela. Wow. Okay, I'm going to come down and go through her bio, right? And stop fangunning so hard over here. Through her activism, scholarships over many decades, Angela Davis has been deeply involved in movements of social justice around the world. Her work as an educator, both at the university level and in the larger public sphere, has always emphasized the importance of building communities of struggle for economic, racial, and gender justice. Professor Davis' teachings career has taken her to San Francisco State University, Mills College, UC Berkeley. She has also taught at UCLA Vassar, Syracuse University, the Claremont College, and Stanford University. Most recently, she spent 15 years at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she is now Distinguished Professor Emerita of History of Consciousness, an interdisciplinary PhD program, and of Feminist Studies. I know I want to take that class, and I know we all want to take that class. So when she goes online and it's free, we'll all sign up. Angela Davis is also the author of 10 books and has lectured throughout the United States as well as Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and South America. In recent years, a persistent theme of her work has been the range of social problems associated with incarceration and the generalized criminalization of those communities that are most affected by poverty and racial discrimination. She draws upon her own experience in the early 70s as a person who spent 18 months in jail and on trial after being placed by the FBI's 10 most wanted list. She has also conducted extensive research on numerous issues related to race, gender, and imprisonment. Her recent books include Abolition Democracy and Are Prisons Obsolete? And the Abolition of the Prison and Industrial Complex, about the abolition of the prison and industrial complex. A new edition of Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass is a collection of essays entitled The Meaning of Freedom. Her most recent book of essay called Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and The Foundation of a Movement was published in 2016. Angela is a founding member of the Critical Resistance, a national organization dedicated to the dismantling of the prison industrial complex. Internationally, she's affiliated with Sisters Inside, an abolitionist organization based in Queensland, Australia, that works in solidarity with women in prison. Like many educators, Angela is especially concerned with a general tendency to devote more resources and attention to the prison system than to educational institutions. Having helped to popularize the notion of a prison industrial complex, she now urges her audience to think seriously about the future possibilities of a world without prisons and to help forge a 21st century abolitionist movement. Well, welcome, Angela. Woo! All right. If we were in a person in a room where Manny was closing the door, this is where we'd all stand up and give you a standing ovation. So I take everybody to just take a moment, breathe deeply, don't fangirl like I am here, and just appreciate having Angela, appreciate having Scheherazade, and appreciate having Tracie. This for us is a historic moment that we may never ever be able to replicate. So just like let's bring it all down and appreciate this moment. And as we do this, we have a short tribute to Angela, right? Angela, we are honored and humbled to have you with us this evening. Before we begin our conversation, we want to take a moment to love on you, to give you your flowers, and just to express a deep, deep, deep gratitude. You have demonstrated to us what long-term dedication to the struggles that center on humanities look like, even when the stakes are high and at a personal cost. You have done this with grace, with humility, and with generosity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate you and love you for all that you are. We invite all those watching to please show some love to Angela in the chat. Just what she has meant to you, who she is, put it down there on a chat. As you do that, I'll give my own personal testimony. So growing up in Kenya and hearing the name Angela Davis, that was something. And then seeing pictures of this fabulous, fearless Black woman with an afro and her hand defiantly raised up, that was enough to make me want to know more about this revolution she stood for. And I'm still learning, right? It's a journey. So thank you, Angela, for just showing us what revolution can be and for the long haul. Thank you. So I will pass it on to Angela and just see what's sitting with her and what words she has to start us off in this conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for inviting me to participate in this conversation that is framed by the fundraiser for Crossroads. I really appreciate the work that Crossroads has done over the years. I know you funded an organization which I helped to found, I can't believe this, 50 years ago in 1972, called the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And it's really wonderful to be here in conversation with Tracie, Hall. Thank you for your work with books. I think books have accompanied me throughout my life. I don't know who I would be or what I would be without books. And thank you, Scheherazade. I so appreciate the amazing work that you're doing, bringing art and healing together in such ways that are so wonderful, but without neglecting the traumas that we can never fail to recognize. So thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you. So just to get us started in this conversation, in my grounding, I talked about all of the things we've experienced in 3 weeks, not 1 month. If you put them in a month, like I don't even know where to start with this one. So there's the missing and found dead of Elise Mallory, and then and the death of Tatiana LaBelle, to trans women in Chicago, all over. This is something that's happening. The grilling of Ketanji Brown, the destruction that's happened in the world, and what's happened to folks of color, especially Black folks. We've seen what has happened to Africans, even as everything that's going on in Ukraine. Like, again, we have all sorts of feelings and thoughts about that this idea of anti-Blackness and racist is not centered in America, but it's a global phenomena. We've seen books banned, and these are books by Black writers mainly. So this moment of being Black in America and being Black of a woman has a lot going on for us. So even as we start in the practice of what we developed during COVID, of just asking people, how are you doing? How are you holding? And how are you making sense of all this, right? So I just want to start off with Angela, then we'll go to Scheherazade and Tracie. Just a little bit of a reflection of how you're holding and how you're making sense of all this.
Well, you know, Jane, I think that we have to learn how to simultaneously mourn and celebrate and call for the intensification of struggle against racism, heteropatriarchy, capitalism. I really appreciate the fact that you began by evoking the names of the 2 trans women in Chicago who were recently murdered, Elise Mallory and Tatiana LaBelle, because it reminds us that when we speak about Black women, we have to define Black women in the most capacious and most inclusive manner. And if we ever want to end violence against women, we have to end intimate and state violence against Black women. And if we want to end violence against Black women, we have to call for an end to intimate and stranger and police violence and state violence against Black trans women. So thank you. Let me just say one more thing. Ketanji Brown is really phenomenal. I mean, they tried to wear her down. You followed the hearings, right? And they tried to wear her down, but they could not succeed. I think she reminds us that after decades and centuries of Black women being hyper-marginalized and ignored and erased, and despite the fact that Black women have always played central roles in resisting racism and sexism and capitalism, and we've always worked intersectionally. Despite this history of erasure, Black women all over the world right now are on the rise. Just before this program, I was on a Zoom call with Christiane Taubira, who is the former Minister of Justice in France, and Pierrette Herzberger-Fofana, who is a Black woman member of the European Parliament from Germany. She's from Germany. And we were discussing the global implications of Black Lives Matter in the African diaspora and globally. And so I feel really energized as a result. I feel energized looking at your faces and knowing that we have a road ahead, but I think that we're well equipped to travel that road.
Hey, hi everyone. When Jane, when you were just talking about all the things that has happened, and all the things we're kind of just like living and holding in our bodies, it is a lot, just to be honest. And so I'm only grateful. Like one of the things I was looking forward to was like unpacking some of those things and really talking to you guys, like having community and sisterhood around what has happened, and particularly to like Black women right now, and those issues. So I think I'm still processing, I would say, and I'm still unpacking and thinking about community, like even like spaces that are maybe typically joyful for us, like watching television, the Oscars. We're constantly reminded about the work that we need to do, right? Like there isn't necessarily those breaks that we have to take those breaks. And so I think that's kind of where I am. On Monday, we took down our Black Girlhood altar for missing and murdered Black girls and young women in Chicago. And so even that, and leaning, I think some of the work that I'm really doing as an artist is leaning into healing and leaning into joy, if that's possible. Those are the kind of things I'm using to like kind of cope with what is going on around us right now.
Well, it's great to be in this conversation, and I'm just noting the uplift that Angela's comment that Black women are all over on the rise is getting. And I think that we need to lead with that, right? Because I think that is the reality. And I think that's what people are pushing back against, right? And we have to see that and understand that. I know that part of what motivated me to become a librarian in my 20s was really looking at the connection between low levels of literacy and low economic mobility, right? And I was really inspired in my studies by Elfrida Chapman, who I think if library science had a parallel to Octavia Butler, it would have been Elfrida Chapman, who unfortunately passed in 2016, because what Elfrida Chapman said is that poverty is compounded by poor information networks. And just as wealth is hoarded, information can be hoarded. And so I do think that we're in an era, even if we look at what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, this desire to shut down information, to blast cell towers, et cetera, to close the media, to lock the media. And I think what we see happening in this country as well is that as Black women, as people of color are on the rise, this desire to shut down ideas, to shut down books, to shut down voices, et cetera. So I do see the connection, and yet it is hope that brings me to this conversation. That's what I'm holding. Even in the midst of a lot of weariness, I'm holding the hope, right, of my grandmother, who only went to school in the 3rd, 6th, and 9th grade, who would have my mother and then me come over and read her bills. And when she talked about reading her bills, I thought, what is she trying to decipher? And then what I realized is that my grandmother, like my grandfather, had low levels of literacy. And so for her to understand what she needed to do next, she needed someone to decipher that. So I think I recognize that just in 2 generations, we've gone from one of the most intelligent women I've ever met. I'm going to say her name as well, Betsy Marie Gilliard Sanders Scott. We went from someone who needed someone to read her bills to someone who is now sitting at least in a place of at least being at the table, as Shirley Chisholm would say, when it comes to the American Library Association, which works not only with public, but with academic and school libraries, special libraries, federal libraries as well. So I'm just feeling hopeful, and I'm just really ready to dig into that hope.
Yes, still we rise, and hope is a discipline. So thank you for that. Tracie, I want to stay with you for a few minutes here. And you talked a little bit about the library and what libraries mean, but also thinking about the carceral system. What does the library and do or can do to end the carceral system as we know it?
Well, I mean, I think that libraries naturally do a lot, right? Especially because the most important thing that we learn when we sit down in library schools, we learn a couple of things. First of all, you learn that information wants to be free, that it is the natural disposition of information to want to jump outside and elude any container, right? So right away, when you decide that you want to be a librarian, you're pushing against anything that would lock up information. And one thing that we have to know in terms of and it was just interesting. Of course, Angela, I have so many questions for you about libraries because you got right to it. That one of the things that we have allowed, along with the disappearance of people when they're incarcerated, to move out of sight, right, is that we have also allowed the information life worlds, as Elfrida Chapman would say, to be contained and to be contracted. We have seen the desire to commodify information. Now, especially with the rise of digital information and tablets, we're seeing some prisons and detention facilities choose to do away with books altogether and to charge people who are incarcerated exorbitant rates just to read a book that would have been $5.99. It might cost that person to read that book. Sometimes some of the fees are for every 10 minutes is $3. So it might cost somebody who might read instead of $5.99, $25.99 or $30 or so. And so I think that what libraries are really trying to do, what we're trying to do at the American Library Association, is to push against that, to challenge the exorbitant rates for reading, e-reading, so to speak, but to also ensure that libraries have free access to information and not curated or looking at books in terms of, and this is what happens sometimes, in terms of what books might, and this is a real quote, trouble the mind of a prisoner. And so what we're seeing is, I think also too, going back to the Black Code laws or the slave code laws, right, where some of the most, the highest fines that one could face, especially if you were Black, was being caught reading, right, or being taught to read, so to speak. But then even people who were supplying reading materials to Black people during that period would also be charged and also faced with corporal punishment. So I am doing a lot of research myself and educating myself, reading Angela's work, which I will speak to really understand the ways in which we shut down information in order to shut down access for people in lots of different ways. So one thing I will talk about later is the prisoners' rights to libraries. And also we are working on at ALA the 2023 edition of our library standards for services to the incarcerated and detained, which we are really trying to look at through a liberatory framework. So there's a lot that we have done, are doing, but there's so much more that I think stands in front of us.
Tracie, we're so happy you're where you are. It's a calling and it's work that needs to be done. So thank you. Angela, I just wanted to respond to Tracie and in that vein, also thinking about your writings and your speeches and the access that we've all had because they've been readily available. So this moment or this where book banning is a thing and gaining momentum and speech is also being monitored. What are you sitting with and what does it mean to all of us?
Well, I think Tracie has already pointed out that this tendency to think that knowledge can be shut down, that information paths can be blocked, has to do with where we are in terms of our consciousness of freedom, I would say, and one of the, I think the most remarkable characteristic of Black history is the fact that, and I've said this many times, Black people in this hemisphere have managed over hundreds of years to pass down the impulse to struggle. One would assume that having struggled so long that people would get tired and just leave it. But no, and this is why I think Black people are embraced all over the world, and especially the music. And Scheherazade, you were talking about the importance of art. For me, what is so remarkable about that long trajectory of struggle for freedom is not so much all of the pain and suffering, which of course has been there, but Black people have been able, in the process of engaging in the struggle to overcome that, to create beauty, to create art, to heal in the process. And now that we are where we are in 2022, and of course this process has been in the making for years and decades, there is an attempt to turn back the clock. There are those who do not want to see us move forward, and we know who they are, and they are the ones who want to prevent us from learning, who do not embrace new knowledge, who only want old knowledge, who want white supremacy, who want to go back to the era of slavery and colonialism, and so that book banning tendency is a part of the effort to refuse to accept the possibility of a new world, of more habitable futures. And as horrendous as it is, I think we also have to analyze it as a response to our victories, as an acknowledgement that we have moved forward and that we represent the right side of history.
Yes.
Jane,
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to just say one thing, and I can't wait to hear what Scheherazade has to say. But I do want to say one thing that I'm just thinking about and listening to Angela, is that one thing that we know, those of us working in libraries, is that at this very moment, we have surpassed the McCarthy era in terms of book banning. It has eclipsed it by far, right? So I'm also thinking about, based on what I think Angela said, and something I just want us to sit with this conversation, is that let's look at the McCarthy era and look at the parallels, right? Let's look at the parallels in terms of what was happening with the early civil rights movement, the mid part, and then I think just the prelude to I would say the sort of Black Power movement, right? That you begin to see this like trajectory, and you see this parallel in terms of the symmetry, in terms of when we begin to shut down on information, especially information by people of color, or books written by LGBTQIA individuals, etc. The parallels are just so stark. I just wanted to just acknowledge that, because it was illuminated in the, even though I sit with this all the time, listening to Angela there, it's like there was an aha, an epiphany about the why. And I just wanted to speak to that. Thank you.
Oh, Tracie, anytime, and Scheherazade, anytime, just jump in. We just have to coordinate our technology so it doesn't make a buzz. But anyway, Scheherazade, just want to hear your thoughts on the books, but also bring into the conversation about your work with a long walk home, which is about girls and Black girls whose joy is often overtaken or taken away or overlooked, right? And yet you say like, no, in the middle of healing, in the middle of all the trauma, in the middle of taking care and affirming Black girls, we're going to seek that joy. Like it or not, we're going to bring out that Black joy. Just talk to us a little bit more about that work.
Yeah, I think Angela spoke very great about like this idea about pain and beauty, how you have that simultaneously. And I think Black girls are that, right? They are in crisis, but they are also, I call them, they are the center of our village, right? Like we rely on Black girls and their labor, particularly it's only been more heightened and seen in this moment in the pandemic, where Black girls were the caretakers in our communities and in our home. They watched their siblings, they tutored their neighbors during virtual learning. They were recruited by nursing homes. We have like a report that we released around the Black girls in the pandemic. And it was startling to see how much we really rely on Black girls and their work. At the same time, they were in the streets. They were head of our social justice movements. Or Donald Frazier is an example of why we need to support and love and care for Black girls. And so this joy that you're talking about is something that that really like propels the work I lift up when I think about like the girls that I work with, because I know I'm like closer and closer to like freedom, like by like just being in proximity of them. Yeah, that's just something that I really, really try to lean on, even as an artist, like that you mentioned in my intro about my Black Girl Play exhibition, where it's really about capturing these moments that we have in society where we cheer on Black girls, right? Like, so it's like the send-offs in Chicago. For those in Chicago, we gather in our communities and we galvanate and we send off the girls. Or if it was in Trinidad, where I'm also from, in Carnival, where we cheer them on stage. And so part of my work as an activist is like, how do we do that not only for these moments in time, but how do we continuously acknowledge their contributions to our society, but also make sure that they're okay. We're not over-adultifying them with their labor that they're doing, and give them the credit that they deserve.
Thank you. So I have one last question for Angela, then I'll hand it over to Scheherazade and Tracie to ask their questions that they've been holding for all these years. So Angela, as I said in my introduction, like the awe of your work and the courage that it took and this bold imagination of a world without prisons, when for most of us we're like, what? Because we've been so trained, like this are the structures, and you don't question those structures, right? And then you come up with all this, and in the last few years, it gains momentum, right? But it also came at a high cost. So do you see this boldness, courage, and stretching of imagination in our current movements of social justice?
Oh, let me unmute. Well, first of all, Jane, I cannot take responsibility for any of this as an individual. Even the books that I've written, the ideas are collective ideas. The ideas came out of being involved with large numbers of people in these quests for justice, and so I can also say that that's where the courage came from. I'm not a courageous person as an individual, but when I'm with my community, engaged in struggle, then I share the courage that everyone generates together, and I think that is really where courage comes from. We're so accustomed to thinking in terms that are so deeply linked to the capitalist system, which defines our relationships and commodifies knowledge, and we think of ourselves primarily as individuals, but we're always in relation with people in our community. We're produced by community. That's where our ideas come from. That's where our joy comes from. That's where our hopes come from. And that's where our imagination comes from. And so I have to say that I know that I would not have been in a position of writing about abolition had it not been for the fact that I learned about the possibility of thinking through the crisis of the prison in abolitionist terms. I learned that from people in prison. I first learned about abolition from the Attica brothers in 1971. And I think so much of the work that we have done in relation to the prison industrial complex is grounded in the intellectual work of people who were, and some of them still are, in prison. When I was on trial in 1972, I was arrested in 1970. Well, people can read about that whole process, but I want to say something about my co-defendant, whose name is Ruchell Magee. Ruchell Magee has been in prison in California for 58 years. We just celebrated his 83rd birthday last week. And before he was arrested in California, he had been in prison at Angola in Louisiana because he had a relationship with a white girl. Now, Ruchell was the very first person who talked about imprisonment and its relationship to slavery. That is where I learned, how to begin to think what eventually became genealogical frameworks about the relationship between slavery and the prison. It was Ruchell Magee who talked about prisoners as slaves, who introduced me to the legal case, Griffin v. Commonwealth of Virginia, in which the phrase the prisoner is the slave of the state, right? Which then allowed us to think about the 13th Amendment. So I could talk about that much more extensively, but I just want to I want to point out the collectivity of these ideas and of the courage and of the boldness. And you ask, do I see that today? Yes, I definitely see it. In the summer of 2020, when more people went out in the streets than had ever demonstrated before in the history of this country. Listen, it's almost 2 years later, but let's not forget that. That was a moment of promise. More white people demonstrated than ever before. And we are still charged with realizing that promise. But that is where our courage comes from. It comes from building community. It comes from organizing movements of masses of people.
Yes, I was taking notes furiously and appreciate this community that we're having right now, and the courage to think and do things differently. So I'm going to share some of the power that I have in asking the questions with Scheherazade and Tracie. So Scheherazade gets 2 questions, Tracie gets 2. Angela, we do have a time; it's not unlimited time, so we're also going to honor your time, and we'll take it from there. So Scheherazade, go for it.
Ooh, I hope everyone else has their pen out, because I always have that with you, Angela Davis. I'm like always such a source of inspiration. And so I have 2 questions that I've been just holding on to while I have this intimate conversation with you. One is, I think about you as a younger self, right? So as you know, I work with young girls. And I wanted to hear a little bit more about a time that I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but you were very public talking about it, about the bombing of the 16th Baptist Church, and how that event for us to this day has shaped so much of activism and the civil rights movement, Nina Simone, Martin Luther King, but you knew 3 out of the 4, or you had relationships with 3 of the 4 of the girls. Which I've always wanted to just hear a little bit more about how that had shifted and impacted you. You were 19 at the time, but how did that, having those close relationships of knowing these girls, impact you as a young activist or a young person?
I should tell you that Carol Robinson, was the sister of one of my very good friends, Diane. And I'm still in touch with Diane. I just before the pandemic, I saw Diane in Birmingham. Cynthia Wesley, one of the others, lived 2 doors away from us. And so we saw each other, every day. They were a little younger than I, but my sister Fania, was very close friends with Carol, and of course with Cynthia as well. And my mother taught one of the girls. So yeah, it was as if our family was assaulted in the most unimaginable way. And I don't think I ever really recovered from that. I think I'm still, every time I think about what happened. I was in Paris at the time. I was in college, and I can remember, calling my parents. And my mother was very close friends with Carol's mother, and my mother actually took Mrs. Robertson down to the church because they had heard that something was going on at the church. So my mother, Mrs. Robertson, didn't have a car at the time. I think her husband had the car. So my mother went and picked up Mrs. Robertson to take her down to the church to pick up Carol. And I can't get that out of my mind. And when I was in France, I remember sort of envisioning, body parts, and even though that's not exactly what happened, that is the image that comes into my mind. And Carol was incredible. She would have been an amazing activist. And I just came back from visiting my brother, who lives down in Southern California, lives part of the year down in Southern California. And one of the young girls who was a part of that group, the same age as Carol and Cynthia, who loved my brother from the time she was like 3 years old. She attached herself to my brother. And, now she's 60 something, almost, whatever, however old we are. She called him and said she wanted to come visit him. And I happened to be there at the time because she was about to make an important decision in her life. And as it turned out, that decision was about becoming an activist. And I tell you that story. She drives a truck, by the way. She's like she drives a 16-wheeler back and forth across the country. But when she said that, I thought about Carol. And I said, oh, she is embodying that spirit. And it may be 60 years later, 70 years later, however many years, but her legacy, their legacy, continues to inspire us.
Thank you for sharing that. My other quick question, because I know Tracie has a lot of pending questions. I would be horrible if I didn't ask about the role of art. One of my dear friends, scholar, I'm not sure if you actually know her, Doris Derby. She was a SNCC photographer. She passed away this week. And so I'm kind of giving this question in honor of her. Someone that I learned about her work way too, she's an activist and an artist, but I feel like I was, as a photographer for 20 years, learned about her later than I should have. I just want to give her an honor tonight, but also if you could talk about this role of art and activism.
I think that one of the hallmarks of this period is the recognition of the role that art plays, not in accompanying struggle, but being the beacon that helps to propel people forward. And I say this because for so many years we assume that art is art illustrates what other people do, or art is the entertainment. You have a big rally and then you bring up the poet, and that's supposed to be the moment where you take a breath and you don't have to think about these difficult topics. But this is the period, I think, when we're recognizing that art does the work of changing the heart, reshaping the emotions, so that we can begin to feel what we haven't yet been able to put in words. And I think that without art there would be no struggle. Black music has politicized more people around the world than any other factor, I think. And can you imagine Black struggle without music? It's the motor that drives the movement. It's the beacon that allows us to see further than we are now capable of seeing. So yeah, without art, there is no struggle.
Well, I'm getting a twofer because I live between arts and letters. And so all of this is just so much to think about and to build on. I do, though, and I'm really grateful again to Crossroads and grateful to have this opportunity to just be intimate and ask questions of you, Angela, that I think will just fuel maybe these walks, right, that we're walking. One, as I said, I've been really sitting with our prisons obsolete, because I understand that as we work on a 21st century edition of these standards, that I really needed to interrogate for myself just this notion of prisons as credible and valid. That if we walked into that, and if I didn't do that, that I wouldn't be pushing as deeply as I could. So one thing that I wanted to ask you about is that, and here, of course, librarians are never far from their books, right? One thing that you say here is that you say the most difficult and urgent challenge today is that of, and this connects to the arts, of creatively exploring new terrains of justice where the prison no longer serves as our major anchor. And I cannot tell you, I circled this so many times. It just stopped me in my track, because I understand that the prison has, especially in the rise of mass incarceration, has become in many cases, if not so much we were aware of it as an anchor. It certainly is a magnet. I think it is an anchor, but I think sometimes the way that it operates, right, it can operate in plain sight. So I want to ask you about that. And I want to ask you specifically for librarians and educators and artists, what can we do to decenter and to take the power away from the prison as an anchor?
You're on mute, Angela.
Well, thank you, Jane. No Zoom program is complete without somebody forgetting to unmute, right? And I was saying, I wrote that book in the early 2000s. I can't remember the exact date, 2002, 2003, 2004, something like that. And it was in the aftermath of a conference that we held, which I think I write about it there, Critical Resistance. And about 25 of us. We created a committee of about 25 people, activists, primarily in the Bay Area, but people were supporting us from other places. And what's also interesting is that years later, it occurred to me, oh, wow, like 23 or 22 out of the 25 people were women or gender nonconforming. And that's something that gets left out in the story that is told about abolition, right? So we were all abolitionists and all trying to figure out how to bring abolition into public conversation, how to encourage. And one of the things that I remember so vividly was listening to family members of people in prison who were so ashamed that their father or their brother was in prison that they could hardly talk about it. And so what we decided we wanted to do, first of all, we wanted to abolish prisons. We knew that. But how to begin the process of encouraging people to think differently about the institution. And that is when we came up with the use of the term prison industrial complex that Mike Davis had written about in terms of the prison economy of California, because we thought if we could, what we called pull apart crime and punishment, if we could disarticulate crime and punishment and demonstrate that the prison itself was connected to so many other factors, to the economy, to politics, to ideology, then we might unmoor, and I'm using the metaphor of an anchor again, from the way it anchors our conversations about harm, about crime. And if we could think differently about why people ended up going to prison, not so much because they committed crimes, even though some people have committed crimes, of course, but because of racism, because of the economy, because of the fact that people don't have education, all of these, if we could re-articulate those issues, then it might be possible to persuade people that we could get rid of prisons. So that was the strategy. And I'm amazed that people are talking about this now, because we kind of imagined, this was back in the mid-1990s. We imagined that none of us would be around when public conversations about abolition started. But we saw ourselves doing the work that would ultimately lead to people seriously examining the possibility of other forms of justice, of transformative justice, justice that is not retributive, justice that is not grounded in violence, but justice that helps to reshape our relations to one another.
I'm thinking so much about, even like Foucault saying that there is no glory in punishment. And I'm thinking a lot about the way in which I think we have normalized, of course, prisons, and we also have normalized low literacy, right? And low wages for pretty much the same population, the same family, our families. The question I want to ask as a follow-up, and my short question and last question then, is really connected to that. Because what I've come away with is this notion of trying to understand what is the kind of accountability we need to create the kinds of the community that can hold people in as opposed to cast them out, right? And I could say a lot more about that, but one thing I can remember is that Jane greeted me in Swahili, and I've spent like probably a total of about 2 years in East Africa, whether it was Tanzania or Kenya. And I remember my first day in Nairobi, some man had stolen, a young man, he had stolen something from someone, and the community was circling both of them. They had caught up to him and brought the person that he had stolen from, and the community was just really asking him the same question, Kwanini, like, why did you do this, right? And he had to answer, he wasn't getting out. And I remember thinking, you know, you talk about restorative justice and all of the notions, right? You know, then I didn't have that language or that vocabulary, but it held me and holds me still, that rather than cast him out, they solved it right there. He said what he needed to say, and then he gave back the thing that he had actually taken. So I just want to ask you about accountability, because I believe that the other A connected to being an abolitionist or to abolition is accountability. And we don't talk about that enough.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I know that, who's in Chicago? Jane, you're in, I know Crossroads in Chicago. Everybody, I thought so. Okay, you all are in Chicago. And I just participated in a collaborative project of writing a book that is called, and it just happens to be on my desk. I'm not trying to, you know, hawk the book, but it's called Abolition, Feminism Now. And Angela Davis, Gina Dent, Erica Miners from Chicago, and Beth Ritchie from Chicago. And I'm bringing this book up. I'm bringing up this book because the very last chapter is about Chicago. And it's about small organizations in Chicago that have, many of which have grappled with this question of accountability, feminist frameworks for justice. And one of the points that we made, and I so appreciated doing this book with Erica and Beth, because I learned so much about Chicago. I mean, I already have deep roots in Chicago, but you know, what we talked about was the fact that oftentimes organizations don't last that long. You know, a small feminist formation might last for you know, a couple of years, and then, you know, people assume that because it doesn't last longer than that it hasn't made any contributions. But in writing this book, we tried to think differently about what victories are, what constitutes victories, and how contributions of small groups have helped to collectively to organize the entire landscape of struggle, have given us new ways of thinking, new vocabularies, you know, more creative ways of addressing issues such as accountability. So since you're the librarian, I'm going to ask you to read chapter 4 of Abolition, Feminism Now.
So Angela just gave Crossroads a shout out. That's where we are. We fund small groups with budgets less than 300,000, collectives without 501c3, without anything, because we believe like you don't need to exist in perpetuity to maintain your structures. Do your work, do it well, and then go on. It's a relay, right? So thank you for that shout out and shouting out our works. It's an honor. So thank you. I'm not sure we had just one more, because I want to bring in Scheherazade, who might have just one more question around self-care and what we do to make sure that we're in it for the long haul. Just that, and then we'll close it out with one round of questions. Thanks.
Oh, my question. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's about really helping us continually process where we are at. Like Jane kind of began in talking about this non-ending pandemic that we're in, the war that we're in, the racial uprisings that we witness, and even processing like the Oscars. I gotta say, I woke up this morning and I'm still trying to really figure what happened, but also in a way that we could teach on, right? Like a teachable lesson around toxic masculinity and accountability and all these kind of things. Where, there's so much there. Like, what does it mean to be an upstander? And so I just really want you to talk about you really lean into like this notion about radical self-care. I've heard you talk really a lot about that, and can you just kind of talk about that for a second as we decompress and imagine as we head into the weekend, like what we could do differently?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I learned how to practice self-care a long time ago. And when I was in jail, I didn't have any other choice. But it was an individualistic approach. I took care of myself. I learned how to practice yoga from a book when I was in jail, before yoga became popular, right? And that was because my doctor, who came in to see me, suggested it, because nothing else was working. I was, just I was not able to. I had headaches all the time. So anyway, I developed a yoga practice, and I still practice yoga today. This is 50 some years later. And I was talking to Emmanuel beforehand, before the broadcast started, and he was saying that he does Pilates because of me. And I've been doing Pilates for I think maybe 15 years now. But it's not just about. It is about taking care of the body, but it's also about collectivizing our way of thinking about our spirits and our emotions. And to tell the truth, I first began to learn about this need when I worked with an organization that was called the National Black Women's Health Project, founded by Billy Avery. And this was during the 80s. It's now, it's still active. It's called the National Black Women's Health Imperative. And that was the very first time that I was, that I confronted the idea that in order to make change, we had to change ourselves. It made no sense to call for a revolution if we were going to be the same old people who had been shaped, by, all of the capitalist, racist structures that define our existence in this society. So I learned from the Black Women's Health Project that we have to be attentive to our physical health. We have to be attentive to our mental health. We have to be attentive to our spiritual health. And that all of that can't happen as long as we only imagine ourselves as individuals. We have to be involved in a collective process of healing our spirits and developing new emotional connections. As abolitionists, we realized early on that we embody the impulses of the state. And that it made no sense for us to talk about abolishing prisons if every time somebody does something wrong to us, our response was going to be that of a Will Smith, right? To jump up and want to fight back. So that meant that we had to do emotional work that would allow us to think about transforming our relations, rather than reacting and being retributive and engaging in punishment all the time. I saw that. I was watching the Oscars.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't usually watch them, but I happened to be and saw that happen. I said, I mean, Will, of all people, who has had access to all of these ideas, embodies the same old violent, toxic, heteropatriarchal approach. But yeah, I think that
I mean, that moment just made me really feel like, there's so many of us aren't well right now, and I think that's like why this question is so important. Like, I think so many of us are just holding on or exhausted as we are in the third year of this, right? Like, I mean, not saying that this is what Will reasons, but it just kind of magnified, like, to me, what is happening in so many different ways, the rises of violence or the rises of suicide rates at this now. And so go ahead. I want you to continue to answer.
No, I'm listening to you. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And yeah, the abuse that's happening. But we're just beginning to be aware of how important it is to attend to our mental health, and one of the strongest arguments for police abolition consists in the fact that the police are the only force that we have to deal with people who are experiencing crises, mental crises. And oftentimes the person who is experiencing the crisis ends up getting shot, ends up dying as a result of the fact that this society has no way of addressing these issues outside of a process that involves armed human beings. But this is a long conversation. I'm glad you raised it. And let me just say this. I'm really thankful to a young activist. You were asking earlier, Jane, about the young activists and their imagination and their boldness, because I think it's young activists who have placed the question of collective self-care at the center of our activism. And I so appreciate the fact that they have gone so much further than we could have ever imagined. I can remember being so angry because a man, an amazing activist, who was fighting against racist police violence and dealing with the murder of a young Black man, for example, in this particular case, we find out later that he's beating up on his girlfriend at home. And we didn't know what to do. There was no language. There was no framework to see that within a political context. And 50 years later, we have so much more insight. And to me, that is an indication of the fact that we are progressing, that we are moving forward.
And that's a fantastic note to bring it home. And what I take away is that we embody the impulse of the state. I'm going to sit with that. And so when we want to be petty and lash out, let's just remember we embody the impulse of the state. Don't be petty. So you're taking the pettiness away from me, Angela, and I like being petty sometimes. So we'll just hold on to that. So as we close on, I just want us to leave on a hopeful note, like this world we are creating, because we know that the current world is not working out for us. What does that look like to you? Like when you sit down, you imagine, and you're like, okay, this is my North Star. What does that look like? And I'll start with Tracie, Scheherazade, and with Angela.
All right. Well, going first, I would just have to be really organic and say that it's moments like these that, for me, are at least part of the roadmap to that North Star. I'm thinking a lot about the conversation about self-care, and also recognizing that in most non-Western societies, we heal together, right? You come together to heal. You come together with community. So I think that opportunities to talk together, to learn together, the generosity, I think that, Angela, that you show to others, to other activists, the way that you lift up movements, the way that you learn and know the names of people who need their names to be known. You embody that, and you always have for me. And so I just want to take this opportunity to say that when people like Angela move deep into community, into learning sessions like this, it lifts us all up. And may we have more of it, and may we continue to have the intimate conversations lead us to the larger macro conversations. That's what's happened today. And I think that's what we need to continue to do. And I'm going to do my part. And I thank you again. This has just been such a wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to talk about this idea about as an artist, because I've been actually like really interested in not just talking about what I hope, what the situations are, but like also starting to create what I really hope and dream to achieve, and like creating freedom spaces with our young people. And so some of the things that they kind of lift up is when I ask them what does a free space look like, right? For Black girls, it's play, it's joy, it's love, it's filled with sisterhood, like how we are here today with our as sisterhood, and rest, right? Like, and care. I want to say those kind of things are important. And just uplifting all those and making sure we give the flowers to the people we deserve. Like Angela, we love you and appreciate you and are thankful for all the things that you pass to us. So just kind of acknowledgement about filled with like love and hope at the same time.
Well, I feel so full. I've learned so much from this conversation, and I thank all of you. I'm going to be a mystery reader for my 7-year-old niece's class in a couple of days. She's going to be absolutely surprised. And I see, as you work with Black girls, Scheherazade, I see the future in her, and I think that we have to learn how to do the work that we do, give of ourselves collectively to create this terrain of struggle that then serves as a launching point for new ideas and new modes of activism, and that means that down the line, generations from now, we will still be a part of that future. So I imagine myself into a future that I don't know and will never really know, but I feel spiritually a part of that future to come, and I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you for nourishing the coming generation, so that we can, all be present and let's say 2050. We will have played a role in shaping, hopefully there will still be people around and struggling at that time. Hopefully we will save the planet. But I think we can all rejoice in knowing that we have done what we can to guarantee that that future will come into being.
Thank you. I really don't want this conversation to end, but it has to. And I keep thinking about why we don't have the spaces. Like Scheherazade said, it's a moment to come, to commune, to learn from each other, to struggle. It was a practice that SNCC had for a long time, where everybody came together in this. And Chicago SNCC has been very instrumental. Locally, we're trying to create some practices where we learn and we struggle together and we do the work. So, but this just goes to point like the importance of that. So deep gratitude. This conversation could be 1 day, 2 days, a week. We hope that next time we invite Angela, she'll be gracious enough to say yes, and we'll just continue learning and being in community. And it's been really humbling. I'm so happy. My heart is full. I don't know what else to say, but just to say thank you so much, Tracie. Thank you so much, Scheherazade. Thank you, Angela. All the best. And that world is coming because of us, because of all the liberation work we've done, we're going to do, and the commitment that we are in it for the long haul. So we give ourselves a pat on the back and invite everybody to continue. So aluta continua, as they say. Thank you all. And we're going to bring back Manny. We're not quite done with everybody else, but as we say goodbye to our 3 panelists, we have another program that's still going on. So yeah, bye guys. Hello, Manny. How about that? I'm like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. And I'm so happy to pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Jane. So many morsels, Black women all over on the rise. Art does the work of reshaping the heart. Without art, there would be no struggle. Collective wellness matters. We embody the symptoms of the state. What an incredible, 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 and powerful conversation. Thank you, Jane. What a powerhouse, so much wisdom. Now I want to give us an update on our fundraiser. The evening is not over. It doesn't end until the final bid. And I have a little surprise on our online auction at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's only like less than 1 hour and a half. I'm looking at the time. There are over 170 items you can also bid on. You can bid on this fabulous t-shirt. Yes, hot off the press. One of a kind t-shirt under the Crossroads Fund swag. That's the name of the item, Crossroads Fund swag. So set your alarm for 9 o'clock. I see this is getting a lot of bids. Angela, Jane, Tracie, and Scheherazade. What a great memento for tonight's beautiful conversation. So you can bid on that. Definitely have some you have some time, an hour and a half to do that. Coming up at 8 o'clock in about 20 minutes, so you can take a little break, a little breather, go get a mocktail, a cocktail. DJ Cash Era is going to be turning the tables. The turntables, and keeping the vibe going. So thank you to everyone who has already given so much generosity. We have moved the needle today. We went from 135,000 raised this morning to over 147,000. Wow. Thank you to everyone who made a contribution this evening, everyone who pledged to make a contribution, and everyone who's already given so much. Thank you. You're an incredible community. And if you would like to make your gift, there is a QR code on the screen. You can also share that with your friends. There's a bit.ly. It's bit.ly/seedsofchange22 to donate. Pull out your phone, share that link with friends. Please do. And yeah, so at 8 o'clock, we're going to send you off to a different link. I'm going to go change my ensemble. And we're going to have some music by the Chicago reader named DJ Cash Era. They were nominated and voted by Chicagoans as the hip hop DJ, Chicago's hip hop DJ. So DJ Cash Era is going to go live at 8. So please go to the link in the chat or the QR code. It will go live at 8 o'clock. So share that with friends. I will see you there. Who knows what I'll be wearing, but maybe it'll be another whippy. Who knows? I'll change. I will see you there.